remember Pebbles from the Flintstones? This is her now. I was really going for like Camille Vasquez, Let's Get 'Em vibes for this video. And then I looked at myself and I was like, you're Pebbles. Well, Pebbles is coming. Hi, welcome to True Crime Wine Wednesday. If you're new here, hi, hello, welcome. I am Sherilyn and I am so glad you found me. If you're not new here, welcome back. Thank you for joining me every single Wednesday. I love and I appreciate you so much. I'm really fired up today, so we are just jumping right into it. No time for chit chat. I do have a quick message for you though before we get started. Thank you again so much to our sponsor today, HelloFresh, my favorite meal subscription on the planet. Any of my Sippendales know that I am a fangirl when it comes to HelloFresh. I was a longtime supporter and customer before I ever had sponsorship by them. I'm so thankful for that, but there's an obvious reason why. In my opinion, they're the best. Absolutely delicious. I asked Big Guy the other day while we were eating our meal, like, what is it? So often we cook similar meals on our own, just trying to go rogue, and it never tastes the same. Like, I can never achieve the same freshness. I know that sounds so cheesy, but it's true. They pride themselves on being fresh. They pride themselves on having quality produce from the farm to your front door in less than a week so that you can just savor those flavors, and it shows. It's also super effortless. Right now, we've been trying to spend as much time as we can at our trailers so that we can just enjoy the very minimal summer that we get here in Alberta. So being able to whip up something super quick, bringing it along with us so the kids can have leftovers that is really easy to heat up for them, I'm loving, because then I don't have to spend as much time firing something up and I can just get my tan on. Not to mention, it helps me feel like I'm Carol Brady, having all the family feel full and really good about the meal choices, yet I wasn't even the one to plan the meal. It was already done for me because I didn't have to go to the grocery store because everything is just packaged all perfectly for you. I also feel like some sort of environmental activist when I'm done cooking because I'm like, look at what I didn't waste. I had exactly the right amount of ingredients that I needed, and I'm just recycling all of the stuff that I don't need, which is just the packaging. I can't even choose a favorite of this week's order because they were all delicious, but the family consensus was, I think the most memorable standout was the chicken schnitzel. I'm drooling. I want to cook it all over again. It was so tender, juicy, lots of fun to make too. You guys know I love making the HelloFresh meals with the fam. Big Guy and I get in there. Sometimes the kids help, sometimes they don't. It's just a fun little experience. So I think that was my favorite, but I'm telling you, just when you think you've had the best, the next week comes and then something on there is just like game changer, new favorite. They're always switching it up, always keeping it interesting. I could go on for days. It's really something you have to experience for yourself. So if you want to check out HelloFresh, go to HelloFresh.com and use my code Sherilyn16 for up to 16 free meals plus 3 surprise gifts. Once again, HelloFresh.com, use my code Sherilyn16 for up to 16 free meals and 3 surprise gifts. Thank you again so much to my HelloFresh fam for your continued support on the channel and for filling our bellies. Okay, let's get going. No riddle again today. They're coming back, don't worry. Today and last week's video, I just really want to have the comment section hearing from you. I want to see what your thoughts are on everything. There is so much to process and digest, so I just didn't want an extra thing in there that we're kind of discussing. If you haven't seen last week's video on the follow-up to the David Elmquist case, definitely go and check that out. None of this will make sense. And if you haven't seen the original one, the first one that I did a couple months ago, definitely start there, or else nothing, not even the last episode, is going to make any sense whatsoever. So if you're looking for the videos as of today, there are 3. I'm going to list them all in the description so it's easy for you to just click and go and watch. But there was the first video that we did that outlined the entire case and story. Last week's video, we listened to all of the tape recordings that were pertaining to the case. And then today, the third video as of today's date, is what I have on my channel thus far. All right, last week we listened to all of the recordings, and I wanted to start there just to get a sense of the story and the turn of events from David's wife's point of view. I wanted you to hear how the investigators were digesting and interpreting everything. And today I want to go through all of the reports because I feel like it really shows, I guess, almost how biased the investigation is, how brushed off the Elmquist family has felt. And I think going through all of this, you'll feel the same. All right, we're going to start with the 911 transcripts. I believe there's no audio of that out there, but we do have the transcripts. I just want to refresh your mind that every time Emily spoke with somebody that night, the tone was very, lacking in urgency. When the 911 operator asked, did you see flames? Did you see smoke? She's like, I look back, there's a little bit, not a lot of smoke, just a little bit of smoke. Take your time. If you're having a coffee, finish it. The desperation that David needed to be helped, it just wasn't there. It was in the call that the neighbors placed though, and that was the first 911 call that came through. So I want to go through that transcript. You're going to be seeing this on the screen. So when you see there's often whited out areas throughout it, they do that to leave out names. So this is the first call that comes through. It's the neighbors. They're giving the address. This caller is saying, I've got your medication. Don't worry. I'm going to be right there. You need to get out. And then they're telling the 911 there is a fire in our apartment. It's apartment 352. Somebody set their apartment on fire. The operator asks, is everybody out? This caller is, rushing their family out, saying, okay, go. And then trying to answer the 911 operator saying, I don't know. There was a lady screaming and I can see smoke coming and it's inaudible there. I'm assuming they're going to say a lot because they do as the call goes on. The operator says they're going to get some help. What's your name? Provides the name. And this caller says, the air is really bad. The fire is really bad. It's really bad. Again, the operator says, okay, we're getting somebody out there. Get everybody out of the house. Get out now. They said, okay, we're going out right now. And then the operator says, okay, goodbye. This is the second call that came into 911. This is Emily's phone call. I just want to point out that I realize that everybody deals with these types of situations differently, but I want you to keep in mind the urgency and the very quick to the point. We need help. This is what's going on. We don't have time to mess around. Get somebody here now from the first call to this call. And these are strangers. This is the neighbor. Now this call is the wife. The operator asks what the address of the emergency is. Emily provides it. They ask, okay, what's going on? Emily says, okay, okay. And then it says David, but it's whited out. The 911 operator says, She says, has started a fire. They ask David did what? Please pay attention to this. It's inaudible. The first part says, on the floor, David has started a fire. Remember, she was pushed out of this apartment, allegedly fighting over a lighter that's never been found. And when she left, there was no fire started. In every interview, even with the inconsistencies of just the timelines, that can happen. We get it. Everything that was very consistent is that she never saw a fire started. Not only that, but when the detectives and investigators had asked her if she saw any flames or smoke, she does say repeatedly, just a little bit. I did look back and there was just a little couple wisps. So she never saw a flame, never saw this fire being started. Yet, in my opinion, this feels like a Freudian slip because going based off of the crime scene photos, you can tell that yes, on the floor in the kitchen by the dishwasher, that seems to be where the fire was started and at its highest point because that's where the most damage was done. The operator goes on to say, are you guys evacuating? She says he is not. And the operator says, okay, I need you to keep your phone to your mouth so I can hear you. Have you evacuated? I'm sorry, yes. Then inaudible, she did say in her interviews that she was focused on trying to chase after their dog because she didn't bring the leash because everything happened so fast. So I'm assuming that there's just a lot going on. The 911 operator can't call her or hear her because she's calling for her dog. She's asked if she pulled the fire alarm in the building. It's inaudible. She didn't. Then she's asked, did you see flames? She said, I saw smoke. You saw smoke. Inaudible. Okay, listen. Again, there's lots going on in the back. The operator asks, you saw a flame. Did you see flames at all? I did not. Take a deep breath. She says, I know, I'm sorry. Asks what her first name is. She provides it. The 911 operator is trying to retain her attention, saying, I need you to stay on the phone. Just give me a second. They're going to get her some help. She says, okay, I'm not. And then this is inaudible. She says she ran outside. There was names redacted here. She's saying, I'm sorry, okay, I do hear the fire. alarms have been pulled. I don't really see a lot of people coming out though. The 911 operator's asking her to listen, take a deep breath. She says, yep. Was anybody in that apartment? She says, no. The operator says, okay. And where are you now? She says, I'm outside of the apartment building. I'm walking to the front of the building, going to the vehicle. She says, okay, you're walking towards your vehicle. I am. Okay, listen. Again, inaudible. What color is the vehicle? It's inaudible. The 911 operator can't hear her again. She says, I'm sorry. There is a car coming. I'm just trying to get off of the road. At this point, the first responding officer comes on the scene. So the 911 operator says that she's going to get off the phone and let her speak with the officer. Emily ends the call with, okay, excellent. Thank you very much. Just two very different phone calls, especially the ending there. Like, okay, excellent. Yes, thank you very much. Whereas the neighbor was, I don't even think said goodbye. The 911 operator said, okay, we're sending the help. They're like, okay, let's get out of the house. Okay, bye. Like, we gotta go. And then obviously, I mean, something that I can't forget and stop thinking about is he started a fire on the floor. And this doesn't mean I'm saying or the Elmquists are saying that she started the fire, but it means that she wasn't truthful. She did not do and say everything she possibly could to save David's life. Her husband's life. She lied time and time again, whether it was downplaying the situation, just being like, oh, okay, well, I just saw a little bit of this, where there's panic from everybody else who's seeing the smoke in the building. That urgency is just not there. In the first phone call, you can see, okay, it's getting really bad. It's really, really bad. Like, we need help. None of that in her phone call at all. Not one plea to come and help David at all. And that set the tone for everything that unfolded throughout the next over 30 minutes. So we're going to read through the reports, and you can definitely feel that. The urgency, the fear of what David would be able to do behind closed doors, 2 first responders, given the information they were provided by his wife. It's just very telling in all of these reports. Like I mentioned in the last video, all of these photos, crime scene photos, reports, audio recordings, you can find them all on Gavin Fish's website. I've got that linked below, as well as his YouTube. Please go and check it out. The work he is doing is phenomenal. All right, the first report we're reading is Officer Coppet? Apologies. I can't pronounce my own name half the time. The report says, on the above date and time, I responded to the address with numerous officers. Officers approached the entrance to the hallway containing apartment 352. The smoke filled approximately half of the hallway, top to bottom, with smoke. I made numerous attempts to verbally contact D. Elmquist from my position. Officers received no response. Several minutes passed with still no response from apartment 352. Officers then entered the hallway to ensure safe passage by a resident attempting to leave their apartment. I then entered apartment 351 after Officer Schick cleared it. There were no occupants found in apartment 351. I then moved items out of the closet area and propped the door open. Officers utilized apartment 351 for officer safety and to have a better tactical position. Given the description of David's mental health at this point, they're in fear for their safety. They can only go off of somebody's character based on the information provided by the people who know them at the scene, and this is his wife, so why would you question it, I guess? Officer Grabo possessed the bunker, and Officer Palm had the 40mm less than lethal. So less than lethal is a less than lethal ammunition, and it's ideal for control and dispersing groups of protesters or rioters. So it's in this little cartridge, and it's shot to just kind of chill out the situation. And I think that's really important, because if they had this on them and they're in fear of their lives because of the description they were given of David from his wife, I'm confused why they used it the way they did use it. If you have something like this used to control situations, I mean riots specifically, I'm just confused as to why they didn't enter with that as kind of their protection, and to use if they needed to, disarm David with this knife apparently that he was wielding around. So they said they had the 40mm of less than lethal. Officers learned that David Elmquist still may possess knives in the apartment. What we'll know in a later report is that this was actually used. It wasn't used to go in the apartment to try to get David some help, but instead the officers went outside the building and they used it to shoot out the windows so that they could clear the smoke. The report goes on to say, a short time later, Officer S. Larson opened the unlocked door and was able to prop it open. Officers were able to see a very limited portion of the apartment. The smoke was very heavy. Officers were able to see what appeared to be an oven mitt on the stove causing the smoke. Officer Larson utilized a fire pole and was able to remove the oven mitt. A short time after this happened, an image began to appear from the smoke. An individual then fell to the ground. Officers and paramedics then placed this individual on the mega mover and carried him to the North Memorial cot. He was then brought to the ambulance. No further information at this time. I think one thing that bothers me in a lot of these reports is when you're just reading it without any context, it's like, okay, several minutes passed, a short time later, you think that this sequence of events is going quite fast. It isn't. I wish that they had just been truthful in 10 minutes passed, 15 minutes passed, 25 minutes passed, 35 minutes passed. 35 minutes passed and then a figure appeared. Not a short while later. You left this man in there when you had something that you could have used to protect yourself from him without using a gun, and you used it to shoot out windows. This next report is from Officer Gerads. Gosh, I'm just butchering these. Apologies. Gerads. It's painful, Sherilyn. I know. I'm sorry. This report says, on February 8th, 2018, at approximately 2300 hours, there was a report of a fire at the address at Unit 352. I responded with Officer Grabeau onto the scene. Once on scene, we entered the apartment building where we located the apartment on the 3rd floor of the west of the building. There was steady smoke coming from the open door to 352. We posted initially in the hallway and to the north of the entry of the unit. We advanced down the hallway so other officers could clear the remaining units on the floor. I posted on the right side of the door while a bunker was kept in front of the door. Once the floor was cleared, the bunker moved back off the door. The door was then wedged open and we continued to call for David to exit the unit. I then continued to hold the right side of the door when facing the unit. There was heavy smoke continuing to roll out and no one was exiting the residence. Officer Larson then attempted to pull a rag off the stove that was smoking heavily with an 8-foot hook. This wasn't a rag, it was an oven mitt. On a second attempt to reach the rag, oven mitt, Larson backed off because David then emerged from inside and collapsed at the threshold of the unit. I called to David to continue to crawl to his left. He had been in there for 35 minutes. They had been waiting outside, calling him with no response. I wonder why. He couldn't speak because he was so badly burnt. You see him emerge. He's collapsed, and you tell him to crawl. This one makes me sick. David initially laid still, but then began to crawl towards me. I observed that David appeared to have burns and blisters over his entire body. Paramedics then arrived, and we assisted David onto a soft cot. I assisted in carrying the soft cot to the stretcher that was outside the front door. I don't know if the emphasis on the soft cot tries to make him feel better about this whole situation or what. It makes you can see. You can feel the energy. It makes me ill. This next report is from Officer Grabeau. On February 8th, 2018, at approximately 22:59 hours, officers were dispatched to the apartment on the report of a fire inside apartment 359. Dispatch advised that the fire may have been started intentionally, and then this name is redacted, was later identified as David Elmquist. Officer Gerards and I arrived on the scene and made our way to the area of apartment 352, where the hallway was partially filled with smoke. Due to the large amount of smoke and threat of fire inside the apartment, officers were unable to immediately make entry. I used the bunker to cover the doorway of apartment 352 while officers went door to door and cleared out any remaining residents. The door to apartment 351 was unlocked, and Officer Palm and I went into the apartment and used the doorway as cover. While the door to apartment 352 was open, officers began yelling verbal commands into the apartment for David to exit. The door to apartment 352 was unlocked, and officers opened the door and propped it open. The apartment had thick smoke that began to dissipate after the door was open. On the floor, I observed a black unknown liquid substance. In the kitchen, I observed that the stovetop was on and glowing orange. There was a towel on top of the burner, and it was smoldering, creating a large amount of smoke. Officer Larson was able to use a fire pole to remove the towel from the stove. Shortly after the towel was removed, some of the smoke cleared, and Officer Larson advised that David was walking to the front door. David walked from the area of the bedroom and made it to the threshold of the doorway, where he laid down on his stomach. Other reports say he did not lay down on his stomach, he collapsed. David was naked and his body was covered in fresh blisters. Large chunks of skin had fallen off of his body and his feet were bleeding. David was conscious and had labored breathing. A litter from the paramedics was brought into the hallway and placed on David's back. Officers then rolled David onto his back onto the litter. David's face was blistered and his body was very rigid. He tried to speak, but was unable to. Yeah, so when you were trying to call, because apparently you needed a response back from him without going in, even though you had less than lethal with you, this explains why. It's because he was burning. He couldn't speak. If he could, I'm sure he would have been begging for help. I assisted other officers in carrying David on the litter from the apartment hallway to the stretcher that was placed outside. Paramedics and fire personnel then moved David to the ambulance. Shortly after this, nothing further was needed from officers, and I cleared the scene. No further information at this time. Oh, it's so heartbreaking. This next report is from Officer Hassman. I responded in reference to a report of a male who pushed his wife out into the hall and then set the apartment on fire. All police units arrived around the same time. As I arrived, the apartment manager showed Officer Schick and me to the apartment 352. There was white smoke in the hallway. It was confirmed that the male, David, was still inside the apartment. Officer Schick and I approached the door and found it to be unlocked. A quick look inside showed the apartment was filled with smoke and we were unable to see inside. We backed off and waited for other officers to arrive. Once officers here we go again. Grabeau, Gerard's, Palm, and then one that's redacted, arrived with a bunker and 40 millimeters less than lethal. We attempted to call David out of the apartment. Once Plymouth firefighters began to arrive, we approached the door and after checking that the door was not hot to touch, opened the door. The apartment was still filled with thick smoke and we were unable to see inside. Officers continued to call David out of the apartment while other officers checked that surrounding apartments had been vacated. It was decided that we would breach the apartment windows in order to air out the apartment enough to make entry. I do find this quite interesting because in another report they said as the door was open, the smoke started billowing out and it was clearing, and once they got the oven mitt off the burner and that was no longer smoking, things were becoming clearer. The fire department secured a ladder to the balcony. Sergeant Top and I climbed the ladder to see if we could get a visual into the apartment. Sergeant Top was unable to see into the apartment due to thick smoke. We got a 40 milliliter and Sergeant Top fired 2 rounds through the balcony door. We had Officer Schick fire 1 round into the apartment window. Immediately after firing the 3rd round, officers aired that David had come out of the apartment. I responded back to the apartment and saw a badly burned male laying in the hallway face down. I escorted North paramedics into the apartment building. As officers and paramedics were getting David into a soft mega mover, they requested a blanket, which I got. After David was transported to HCMC by North, I briefed Chief Goldstein, who had arrived on scene. Sergeant Bird was contacted and briefed on the incident. Sergeant Top contacted Crime Lab. The crime scene was secured. Officer Sutherland was with Emily and I went to talk to Emily. I explained to her that David was in critical condition with major burns over his entire body. I answered her questions. I then spoke to the apartment manager. I briefed her on the incident and advised her of the biohazard cleanup needed and requested they board up and secure the apartment once we were finished with our investigation. Once Crime Lab arrived, I took photographs of the scene. Sergeant Bird arrived. Once he had the information he needed, I then cleared. Emily had brought her dog with her to the hospital. Officer Sutherland brought Emily's dog back to the police department for a short period of time until Emily's dad could pick the dog up. At approximately 3:40 hours, I received a call from the Hennepin County medical examiner who advised David was deceased. They requested the report be faxed to them. That's the end of the report. There is a lot of explaining to do by Officer Hassman. I'm curious as to why this notorious knife that kept officers from entering was never mentioned when Officer Hassman admits to being the one who photographed this scene and would have clearly seen the knife since there were photographs of it. With everything else that is mentioned in the report, This weapon that everybody has used as the reason why they didn't enter, because he had access to knives. You're photographing it to say, oh, okay, here, I did get a photograph of the knife. The lack of having that in a report is because you don't want to bring attention to it. And the only reason you wouldn't want to bring attention to it is because you knew that it was not David who had touched that knife and had it on the ground. This should be a really easy question for Officer Hassman to answer, yet it never has been. So please, all of my Sippendales, go and direct all of your questions to Officer Angela Hassman with the Plymouth Police Department and ask, what's the deal with the knife, girl? This next report is from Officer Larson. It starts by saying they responded to assist at the scene of an apartment fire. David's name is redacted here, had recently been released from a hospital and started a fire and was still inside. Officers arrived and we located the apartment in question. The door was shut and the hallway was filled with smoke. Based on information at hand and conditions of heavy smoke, it was not safe for either fire nor police to make immediate entry into the residence. So based on information at hand, which was that his wife said that he was a threat and a danger and had mental health issues and had access to knives. Eventually, I opened the unsecured door and propped it open for ventilation, and so officers could attempt to call in and direct anyone out. The stove was visible from the threshold and appeared to have something burning on it. I used a pole provided by the Plymouth Fire and attempted to remove items from the stove top from the threshold. On my second attempt, I observed a human silhouette appear in the hall from a cloud of thick smoke. I moved back, giving the bunker team a clear view, and the person fell onto the ground in the doorway. The person crawled out further as directed, and we placed him on a litter and carried it outside for the ambulance personnel. Again, this is another statement saying that they directed David in this condition to crawl out. This is also just more confirmation that because of the information that was provided, it prevented David from getting help quicker. That is help 35 minutes that could have been used to save his life. The next report is from Officer Palm. It starts by the address. It says the call text stated someone in apartment 352 had started a fire. Another caller stated the apartment was on fire and David was still inside apartment 352. Upon arrival, I spoke with a resident in the parking lot who stated the fire was on the north side of the apartment complex. Officer Duncan and I went into the north entrance and searched for apartment 352. Other officers located apartment 352, which was actually in the middle of the complex just south of the main entrance. So this sounds like there was a lot of confusion and took quite a bit of time to, I think, get there is what I'm making out here. The hallway outside apartment 352 was filled with smoke. Officers learned that David Elmquist had poured oil on himself and started himself on fire. Officers evacuated residents from the building and began yelling for David to come out of apartment 352. David never came to the door and the hallway continued to fill with smoke. Officers approached the door with a bunker and confirmed that the door to apartment 352 was unlocked. The apartment directly across from 352 was also unlocked. Officers were positioned on both sides of the door as well as directly across from 352 in 351 and continued to yell for David to exit the apartment. Officers were able to open the door to 352 and prop it open. Apartment 352 was filled with thick smoke and we were unable to see very far into the apartment. Officers observed a thick dark liquid on the floor of the apartment as well as a towel burning on the stovetop. It appeared that someone had already attempted to put the fire out using a fire extinguisher. We do know that from the very first episode that the maintenance manager lived in the building and immediately ran up and extinguished the fire as well as David. That actually just made me think, I wonder if anybody ever interviewed the maintenance manager. I don't have the report here, but I feel like him being somebody who was not in fear for his life, ran in, extinguished the fire, extinguished David, would have been somebody very important to talk to say, I didn't see any weapons. He was standing unclothed. I didn't notice anything in his hands. I ran out. That's just my thoughts, and I just thought about that. The burner on the stove was on and was glowing orange. There was a bench in the entryway that had been burned and was smoking. It was decided that the exterior windows of the apartment needed to be broken out to ventilate the smoke from the apartment. Using 40mm launchers, officers were able to break the sliding glass patio door and a bedroom window. As the windows were being broken out, David emerged from the apartment. He walked out of the back bedroom and collapsed as he got to the threshold of the door. Officers called for North paramedics to enter the building. The paramedics brought up a litter and David was placed onto it. Officers carried David to the gurney and he was immediately transported to Hennepin County Medical Center. David's entire body was severely burned, so bad that his skin was falling off of him. Plymouth Fire was on the scene and were able to clear the apartment, confirming that there was nobody else inside. Plymouth Fire was then able to ventilate the apartment. Hennepin County Crime Lab was requested to process the scene. Pictures were taken of the apartment and uploaded to the case. Officer Sutherland took a recorded statement from Emily Elmquist and then transported her to HCMC. See other officers' supplements for further information. David Elmquist died due to his injuries. This is quite straightforward. I do want to say one thing to mention here when they're talking about the launchers being shot through the windows. It says that they shot through the sliding glass patio door, which they did, and then also a bedroom window. And in another report, we'll see that that window had already been opened. It was opened prior to Emily leaving that apartment. And I say that because you can see everywhere that David walked throughout the apartment because he was just covered in oil. So you can see his footprints and he was moving around the apartment. Anything he touched either left oil, skin tissue, blood behind. And this bedroom, there was no footprints leading into it. There was no blood or tissue on the window to have opened it, and it was wide open. Also keep in mind, this is in the beginning of February, but I just wanted to clear that up just because that bedroom window was wide open already. So it wasn't because of these launchers that opened up to air out. There was already somewhere for some of this smoke to go. This is Officer Schick's statement, and I believe this is the statement where we do realize the window was open already. So it says they responded to the apartment. Initial information was that a male had set himself and the apartment on fire. Upon arrival, Sergeant Hassman and myself located the apartment. The hallways were filled with heavy smoke. We cracked open the apartment door, but we were unable to see anything inside due to the heavy smoke. We backed off and continued to secure the hallway. Other officers arrived and began giving commands for everyone to come out of the apartment. I assisted with clearing all surrounding apartments. Both officers and firefighters determined that we needed to try and break out the windows to clear out some of the smoke and see inside. I deployed a 40mm and launched and fired one blue tip round into a bedroom window next to the patio door. I then realized the glass window had already been open and I only shot through a screen. Immediately after the windows were broken, we were updated that the suspect was walking from a rear bedroom to the front of the apartment door. I responded to assist and help get the suspect to the ambulance. It really bothers me that the term "the suspect" is used here. I then assisted with preserving the scene until investigators arrived. I have no further information at this time. Oh, well, Officer Schick, I think you do have some further information because you are saying that you assisted in preserving the scene. So I guess we also have additional knife questions that can be sent to Officer Schick. This report is from Officer Sutherland, and this is who in the last video that I did with the tapes, who is interviewing Emily on the scene in the back of the car. And this report just really bothers me, mainly because I feel like if you're writing a report, this is your statement. This is what you believe to be true. You need to be accurate, especially in situations like this where someone is wanting to go back and look at it and they're taking your word for it. So here she says, basically, like, it starts out like everybody else, that there was smoke in the hallways. There was a reporting of an apartment on fire. She arrived on the scene. David was inside. He had thrown oil all over his body and threatened to light himself on fire. Emily stated that David asked her to read the Bible with him, and after she told him she had homework, she could hear what sounded like splashing. That's not what was told to her at all. She stated she came out of her room to investigate and observed David standing between the kitchen and the hallway wet with oil. She stated she saw the oven turned on and grabbed a lighter out of his hands. Emily stated David threw her cell phone out of her hands and told her it was time for her to go. Again, it paints him as an aggressor. She never said he threw the cell phone. She said he went to the bedside table and got it before her. I believe that was the version she gave her. She also said that she had it and then David took it from her hands. Regardless, he never threw something out of her hands. Emily stated she grabbed her cell phone, dog, and then what she thought were her vehicle keys and ran outside. Emily stated that David had been previously hospitalized for mental health issues within the last 2 weeks. She stated he has been speaking recently regarding the second coming of Christ and would tell Emily she was living a lie. Emily stated David is currently prescribed risperidone 3 milligrams and she believed he was taking them regularly. However, knows in the past he had spit them out. Risperidone is an antipsychotic medication. Emily stated, besides the past couple of weeks, there have been no major instances that have been similar. She stated that there had been marijuana use in the past, however, didn't know if there was any tonight. I took a recorded statement from Emily. See that statement for further information. During the statement, Emily received a call from HCMC where David was transported and received news that David's condition was extreme. I transported Emily to HCMC where I stayed with her until family arrived. No further information at this time. I guess what bothers me is, like I said, this is your report. This is what people are going to reflect back on. This is in the file. You had interviewed her and had the recordings. For goodness sakes, you could have referenced your own recordings to just make an accurate written report. It just bothers me saying, oh, he was wanting to sit down with her and read the Bible and she said no, so she went to do her homework and then all of a sudden she hears the splashing noise. That's not what happened. She noticed later a Bible. She said it was on the bed. From the crime scene photos that we'll look at, it's on the nightstand. Again, I mean, that's neither here nor there. The point is that Emily, in all of her statement, said that she was either dozing off or sleeping. And David had been off. She thought he was beside her, but he wasn't, it turns out. And that when she saw him next, he was standing over her naked, saying that she had to leave. And then, yeah, this whole like throwing the cell phone out of the hands, and it just bothers me, especially when you had the recordings just to, jog your memory and reflect back on. All right, this is Officer Top's report. It says, I assisted other police and fire at the scene of the apartment. I'm just skimming here a little bit. It's believed that the male had in fact lit a fire and the fire alarms were sounding and the tenants were evacuating. This area here is all redacted about Emily's information provided. It says the caller and then it's all blanked out. So that's interesting. I feel like whatever information was provided would be quite important for everybody to have that information, not just like myself and us, but I mean for his family. So it goes on to say, upon arrival, officers found heavy smoke in the third floor hallway near the apartment. Due to the smoke, officers were unable to gain entry. Then again, a lot of this is just repetitive. Again, there's a lot of stuff redacted here, and it says the male did not have access to firearms. So I'm assuming they're saying that they asked Emily if there was any firearms, and she said no, but likely possessed knives. The male suffers from depression and has attempted suicide in the past. This is inaccurate. So I don't know if that's what he was told. It's not true though. I assisted Plymouth Fire, who had now arrived on the scene as well. Officer Top says that he was part of the crew that went out to go and break open the windows. So Officer Top was the initial one to deploy several 40mm impact rounds through the patio balcony door, and then says that Officer Schick deployed the additional ones. And then it just says that at this point that they were then notified that David had made his way to the front of the door and that this officer didn't see him but was advised about his injuries. Hennepin County Crime Lab was then contacted to process the scene. I then cleared the location and Sergeant Hassman maintained police control. So again, a lot of questions for Sergeant Hassman. And then this just reaffirms that it was her responsibility to maintain control of the scene there. It's getting hot. The temperature is increasing here. I'm sure you can just feel me seething. Just having confirmation that David was really painted to be this dangerous person is hard to read. It also really bothers me how his mental health was portrayed, saying, oh, he suffered from depression and attempted suicide in the past. Who gave you this information? If it was his wife, that's a huge problem. He had not been diagnosed with depression. He had been treated for psychosis. He also had not attempted suicide in the past, as per her own words. Several times, not only on tape, but under oath in court when a judge was determining if David was fit to be released back. There are a lot of answers that need to be given here. To me, this is a huge problem. Who told you this? Because if it wasn't Emily's statement, then that means that you've made a false statement because you're trying to shift blame off of the department for allowing an unarmed man to burn in his apartment for 35 minutes. Either or, there are a lot of questions that need to be answered in Officer Topp's report here. This next report is from Officer Whiteford. It says, I arrived at the scene, brought in my 40 millimeter less than lethal equipment. I handed it off to Officer Palm. Sergeant Top later took control of it and deployed it. During the incident, a witness approached me, identifying himself as, and then the officer provides the name of the neighbor who lived in apartment 354, the apartment directly south of the incident location. He told me he was down the hallway doing laundry when he heard a female start screaming. He said the female was the occupant of 352 and was banging on her door and neighbors' doors. She was screaming for people to help her. She was saying her husband was lighting himself and the apartment on fire. She had some type of oil substance on her clothes. She also had her dog. The neighbor said he saw smoke coming out of 352. I took this information down. Due to the unraveling scene, I told him someone would contact him if we needed to get a statement from him. I believe this is the only report that talks about Emily having oil on her. And it's just frustrating because I feel like seeing that placement would be really important, especially because she focuses a lot about where the oil was and where she washed it off. And there was no photos taken of her at the scene or that evening. All right, so the remainder of the reports are reports that were given after. So when questions started to be asked, they needed to continue to write out reports to enter into the file. So this is on February 10th, 2018. Officer Hultgren gets a phone call from Scott. It says, the victim's father, Scott Elmquist, called to find out more about this case. He wanted to relay information to the detectives in charge about his son's marriage, and his death. I gave Scott the phone number to the detective sergeant. Pretty straightforward, but it just goes to show, like, right away, Scott knew something was going on and somebody needed to know about the information that he had. This is a supplemental report from Officer Top. It says, the victim's sister called to relay information regarding his death. This was on February 19th, 2018. Amy Hartsock advised that David had mentioned the cause of his recent mental breakdown to possibly be related to his marijuana use. Hartsock thinks David's marijuana may have been laced with something triggering his shocking behavior. Hartsock advised that David's wife may have what was left of the marijuana or paraphernalia items David used. I advised Hartsock that I thought it was an unlikely case, but I would relay the information. I want to give some context here. David's wife kept David's sister very close to her. This is something that he brought up in the conversation that he had with his parents on the very last day that he went to go see them, saying that he wanted to divorce her. He said that Emily was manipulative. She kept him from his family, and he said she has Amy, who is David's sister, wrapped around her finger, believing her. At this time, Amy was definitely struggling, trying to fully go where her father had been, thinking that something was wrong. She was hoping that there's just going to be this different explanation. I mean, you don't want to think about that about somebody who you're close to and that you trusted to love your brother as much as he deserved. The next report is a supplemental report from Sergeant Bird, and it just says that there was a request from the Hennepin County Attorney's Office requesting the Verizon Wireless and T-Mobile phone records from February 6, 2018 to February 10th, 2018. To this day, the family has never received the phone records. This next report is another one from Sergeant Bird, and it might be the one that bothers me the most. I've read it several times, so I'm now able to read it without raging. It still does get me pretty angry though. So the synopsis is, and it gives the synopsis of everything that happened on February 8th. They responded to the apartment. A male had purposely set himself on fire. David's wife, Emily, met with officers in the parking lot when they arrived. At this point, it breaks down everything that all of the other reports said. And then it starts with the investigative activity. Again, this is just briefing on everything that unfolded, how Sergeant Bird was notified by everything from Sergeant Angela Hassman. And then again, full rundown of everything we've already gone through. Then it says, I walked through the scene with the Hennepin County Crime Lab deputy and Plymouth police officers who were still on the scene. During my walkthrough of the apartment, I made the following observations. The entire apartment was heavily damaged by smoke. The kitchen sustained the heaviest damage and appeared to be the source of the fire. There was a plastic 1-gallon container sitting on the kitchen counter that appeared to be the source of the oil used by David. The bottle was damaged by the heat and no longer contained a label that would identify what type of oil oil it was. There was a fairly significant amount of oil on the kitchen floor and in the entryway of the apartment. There was evidence that David had moved throughout the apartment after setting himself on fire. There were bloody footprints throughout the unit, oil smears on the walls, and burnt skin located throughout the unit. The burnt skin was found on 2 different places of furniture in the living room and on the bed in the couple's bedroom. There were 2 kitchen knives found laying on the dining room floor. I examined the knives along with Hennepin County Crime Lab and determined that neither had any evidence of bodily fluids on them and neither appear to have played any role in this incident. The entire scene was photographed by myself and Hennepin County Crime Lab. My photos are attached to this case. It then says how the fire marshal arrived and conducted their own survey of everything and took photos. It then says on March 1st, he met with the victim's wife, Emily, and she voluntarily recorded a statement with them about everything leading up to the death. We listened to that in the last video. It's quite a detailed report. I'm going to assume he listened to the call, unlike Officer Sutherland when he went through this. So we've already heard all of this. Then the report goes on to say on March 22nd, I received the cause of death report from the Hennepin County Medical Examiner's Office. The report indicated that the immediate cause of David's death was thermal injury and inhalation of products of combustion. Other significant conditions that were noted are history of substance-induced psychosis, unspecified schizophrenia spectrum disorder, and cannabis use disorder. David's manner of death was determined to be suicide. The toxicology reported that David had ketamine in his system at the time of his death. This was the only controlled substance found in his system. Based on my training and experience, I know that paramedics frequently give patients ketamine to calm them down and to manage their pain. You can read this full report on GAVIN's website. It just breaks down, when the investigators came in, that you can read their reports, etc. Then it goes on to say, it should be noted that throughout the course of this investigation, I have had ongoing contact with David Elmquist's father, Scott Elmquist. This has included phone conversations, numerous emails, and one in-person meeting at the Plymouth Police Department. Throughout the investigation, Scott has expressed numerous concerns regarding his son's death. I will attempt to address most of these concerns below. First concern, Emily did nothing to try to stop David from harming himself. Him answering the concern, Emily says in her statement that she did, in fact, try to stop David from lighting himself on fire, but was unable to do so. Okay, next concern. Officers waited outside of David's apartment for 30 minutes while he was inside gravely injured. The response. When officers arrived on scene, there was no active fire inside of the apartment. The apartment was, however, filled with heavy black smoke. Plymouth police officers do not have any training on how to enter a smoke-filled building, nor do they carry the proper protective equipment that would allow them to do so. Due to the fact that David had purposely lit the fire and was clearly not acting rationally, I would not have been prudent or safe to allow firefighters to enter the dwelling. Officers worked diligently to clear the smoke from the apartment while trying to verbally contact David the entire time. One, this is just such a strong reminder as to why we need more resources for mental health and to have those resources on scene, because leaving somebody burning in their apartment for over 35 minutes when they clearly need help, it's not okay. The next concern, David had an unknown blue object in his hand when he died. The response, David died in the burn unit at HCMC Hospital. Photos taken by Hennepin County Crime Lab did not show that David had anything in his hand when he died. I spoke with all of the officers who were at the scene of the fire and all say David did not have anything in his hands when he exited his apartment. There is a blue ballpoint pen laying on the kitchen floor of the Elmquist apartment. The pen is not burnt and does not appear to have played any role in this incident. Is that kind of how the knife doesn't play any role in the incident either, even though it's in the scene? Next concern, Emily has provided varying accounts of the night that David died. The response, Emily has provided 3 accounts of what happened on the night that David died that I am aware of. She initially provided a brief statement to Officer Sutherland shortly after officers arrived on scene of the fire. Emily would later provide a recorded statement to the Elmquist family, which I have listened to. Emily then met with me on March 1st and provided a lengthy recorded statement about the events of that evening and the weeks leading up to it. While minor details vary between her statements, the significant facts have remained the same in all of these accounts. I would agree with that. At this time, she hadn't done the interview with the fire marshal, and I feel like that is like one of the most drastic differences where there's more time to think and really distance herself and paint David in a worse light. The next concern, David was planning to leave Emily prior to his death. The response to this, Scott advised me that David planned to leave Emily just before his death. Emily said that David never discussed this with her. That's it. Oh, okay. Emily said that conversation never happened. Okay, didn't happen. Perfect. Move along. The next concern, David was a vulnerable adult at the time of his death and Emily failed to properly care for him. The response, according to Hennepin County Adult Protection, David did not meet the statutory definition of a vulnerable adult. They advised that once he was released from Fairview Riverside, he was no longer vulnerable as it pertains to the law. David appeared to have been able to provide for his own basic needs, dress himself, feed himself, take his own medications. David had even been cleared to return to work by his doctor at the time of his death. I don't really think that that was the way that the family was hoping to interpret that. I think it is that she provided very misleading description of David. There was no urgency in her request to get him help. She knows his character very well. She knows, stated in court, he had never been suicidal. This is not normal. You would think that you would want to get your husband help and that you know this is just not the way that he normally acts. When he had never in his life threatened to harm her, take knives out of the knife block in the kitchen and injure himself or her, why was that ever brought up? It was her responsibility to get him help, provide everybody with the details that they needed to do that in a timely fashion, and she didn't. So this has nothing to do, in my opinion, with him no longer being vulnerable. Again, if this is a episode of psychosis again, this can come on without warning at any time. So it doesn't mean that if he was vulnerable at one point and now cleared for work, all of a sudden he's no longer vulnerable and it means that he's never ever going to experience something like this again. That's not how it works. Another reason why we need more mental health training or more professionals actively involved in cases like this. The report ends saying on October 30th, 2018, this case was referred to the Hennepin County Attorney's Office for review of any potential criminal charges as it relates to David Elmquist's death. The whole thing really bothers me. If you go and read it also, there's one thing that I wanted to point out when he's kind of giving a breakdown of the interview that they had. You know, he's very thorough. One thing he likes to leave out, though, is that during the episode of psychosis that he went through, he details everything, how it went, makes David seem, out of his mind, and then completely leaves out that she slapped him across the face, laid her hands on him. It's not in this report at all. So you would have to listen to the tapes to even know that she had done that. And then when it comes to just addressing Scott's concerns, I can't imagine how the Elmquist family feels reading this. The answer to, David came over saying that he wanted to leave, the marriage was toxic, all of this information. And then the reply is, I asked her and she didn't say that. I also don't recall hearing that in their interview that they did, but that's neither here nor there. She does say that she knew David was going to be going to his parents in the interview that she did with the fire marshal. So I guess my question now is, since that interview with the fire marshal was done after the interview with Officer Bird, now that she admits in that one interview that they did discuss him going to live with his parents, what is the response to the family now? Has she been asked why she lied or why she left this very important detail out of that interview? I don't know. I feel like this needs to be asked again. It needs to be addressed. The next report is on April 11th, 2018, and then this was the fire marshal's report. The fire marshal report it's frustrating for me just because the fire marshal wasn't there, right? Their purpose is to come on the scene and try to look at it and give a description of what might happen. So they really have to go based off of the information that they're provided from witnesses or investigators. And so the information that this fire marshal was provided, that the male had poured cooking oil on himself, pushed his wife out into the hallway and lit himself on fire, really hammers home that fire and law enforcement had arrived, but they were forced to wait outside of the apartment because the male would not come out. He was burnt to 90% of his body. He kind of goes through the scene and just lays out where he believes things happen. It says that using the electric stove as the ignition, since there was never a lighter found, even though Emily said one, they believe that he lit himself with the electric stove. So I try to picture it. I'm like, did he put his arm on it and it just engulfed? Like, were there coil marks from where the stove was gonna, burn you and start this flame? It's all missing. All these questions are missing. Then here, what really bothers me, a standoff occurred for a short time with law enforcement. A, there was no standoff. B, it wasn't a short time. He was left in there for 35 minutes. And the husband eventually came out, said he could use a drink of water, and was hauled away by the ambulance. What kind of verbiage is this, first of all? Like, we hauled the perp away. Ugh. And then to just go rogue and try to make up your own report here. The husband came out and he said he could use a drink of water. No one's report who was there said that at all. I just don't understand how this is allowed to be out there in circulation. All right, we're going to finish up today's video with just briefly sharing my opinions on the autopsy report. I don't want to read it. It's really hard to read. I just can't imagine being Scott when he felt something in his gut that he needed to order the report and the photos. Ugh, my heart aches for the family. I do want to bring up a couple questions. The report is out on Gavin's website though, so if you do want to go and read it yourself, it's there. The importance of getting answers when it comes to the autopsy report is that one of the Elmquist's main questions that they want answered is, why were there 2 marks that were completely untouched on David's wrist? And they are in a crisp pattern. It's not, oh, it kind of is from the flame a little untouched here. No, it looks like there's untouched, that something straight, square, right here on his wrists were untouched. In the last video, I didn't show them. I'm going to share them here today. The family wants to know why these areas are unburned. What would cause that? And what's interesting is you'd think that you would get an answer from the autopsy report. And I apologize, I'm going to go TMI here, but it's literally just to stress how very important facts and questions are being overlooked. So in the report, they're detailed enough to basically skim over the amount of pubic hair that David still had left. Yet they didn't think that it was important enough to make note of these 2 visibly very clear unburnt areas on his wrist. There's also mention of 5 superficial abrasions to David's head, and this has never been investigated further, never explained why. No one has acknowledged it. And that is where I'm going to leave you today. I know when I did last week's video, I said it was going to be in 2 parts. We're gonna go in 3 here. There's still so much to go through that I want to retain the attention, go through the information, really get these questions out there. So next video, we're going to be going through the crime scene photos and all of the questions that I have there, and we should all have there. I'm also going to update you a little bit about what the family knows of kind of where things are at with David's wife, as well as a lot of the battles that the family is having to fight behind the scenes right now, and this long road that they still have ahead of them. Oh, hi, just kidding. I had already filmed part 2, which you just watched or still watching. And then part 1 came out and I saw all your feedback on liking the longer video. So I thought, okay, well then I will just combine the 2 of them into one. But this is a new day, so it's a new Sherilyn. I have to say this right now because I'm sure you're all looking and just dying like I was when I saw them. Huge thank you to Modern Métis. Her name is Chris, but you can find her at Modern Métis on Instagram for making these earrings. She made me another pair and I'm still waiting on 1 more. I'll share them with you when I get them. Absolutely gorgeous. If you are looking for a proud Métis woman to make these beautiful beaded earrings for you. She has a bunch of different things that she does. And I've even seen like beadwork she does on hats and stuff. Absolutely beautiful work. Go and check her out. It's Modern Métis on Instagram. And her name is Chris. Tell her I sent you. All right, so we just left off reading the reports and we're going to go through the crime scene photos in the next one. There is something now that I've kind of had the chance to already read what you guys have said with the first video about the tapes. One thing I do want to apologize for is the audio. I know, especially in that second one, it's really hard to listen to just because it was recorded on a phone, so it's not always the easiest way to get nice crisp audio. I have heard that if you slow down the tapes, I know it's kind of a pain in the butt to do it going back and forth from me and the recordings, but if you slow them down to, people were doing it like 0.75. I have it pinned on that video. And I think now the closed captioning is available on YouTube. It's not always the most accurate, but it will help, I think, more than not having it on there. Next time, I promise I'll have some captions on there for you. But yeah, slowing it down, adding those captions now for YouTube. They weren't available immediately when I released the video because that takes some time on like the back, I think, techie end of things. Their computer automated generated system, way too obviously intense for me. Anyways, that is all out there and it's ready for you now. If you were kind of getting frustrated about the tapes, you might have better luck adding those captions and then slowing it down. Thank you for your guys' patience and going through it and just listening. And I also appreciate so much your input. It made me think about things, and even David's family who was reading them as well, think about things that maybe we hadn't considered. So I love hearing from you in the comments. That's the reason why I didn't want to do the riddle, and I'm so thankful for you. All right, so we are going to go through the crime scene photos now. Like I said, you can find all of these on Gavin Fish's website. And I really want to hear from you and what your thoughts are when you look at them. For me, I love hearing from you because you point out things that I may have overlooked. I've seen these photos so many times. I feel like every time I look at them, I notice something new, but in the same sense, they're also very familiar to me. So having that new perspective, it's really beneficial and so helpful. All right, we're going to skim through them. I don't have full details about all of them. Again, like I said, if you want like a longer view at them, head on over to Gavin's. But while we're going through them, I will just like point out some things on the ones that I found very curious. So when we first open up Gavin's site, here we've got the entrance to the building. Now, what I would really like to do is hopefully one day be able to go to the building and see one of the suites that's similar to theirs, if not theirs, or try and like recreate it. This is, something in my mind down the road that I'd really like to do. So I kind of want to see like where that side entrance was from. But for right now, this is the only photo of the building that we have of the outside. And so the next photo, this is the entrance to the apartment. So you can see so much oil here. And then this here, the door. I'm curious about this thing that's hanging off. I don't know if it's always been there, but they made note of it. Another entrance. And I believe this is where the keys were, where she talks about reaching for the keys. They were on this hook. This here looks like a little bit of a struggle to me, that something has been ripped off of the wall on the left. Here you can just get a feel for how much oil was poured. Now, I believe these are her keys. We know that she said she grabbed David's. And here in this photo, you can really see the dishwasher. And this is where it's quite melted. It's down low. This is where it's believed that the fire started and where it burned at its hottest. And it didn't really spread from there much. This is telling to me because on the 911 phone call that I was mentioning earlier, she says on the floor, David started a fire. And so this is like quite low. Remember, she said she never saw him start a fire or flames or would know where it was. So this is very telling. And then something that I want to mention here too in the next photo, the layout of the kitchen. So you can see that the dishwasher is to the right and the stove and oven is to the left. And so this hallway down here where she's saying that she came out from her bedroom, looked down the hallway and she could see that the burner was on. You can't. You're looking at the dishwasher. You physically have to come through and come to the entry of the kitchen to see that the light is showing that it's on, because that oven, its back faces that wall to the hallway into the bedroom. So you have to come in and look and turn and see that it's on. This also here in the next photo is, I don't know, it's odd to me. You can see the jug in the upper corner here, just sitting on the counter. I don't know. I feel like in this frenzy and stuff, I guess I don't know where my mind would be at, but I feel like if I'm just like tossing stuff, I'm probably just gonna let it drop. If I'm not being myself and I'm in an altered state, I wouldn't be thinking about like, okay, let me gently put this back here. I don't know. It could be nothing, but when I first saw that, I was like, oh, it's just sitting right there. Here is the oven mitt that was smoldering on top of the burner. And then this is the one that one of the first responders or one of the officers grabbed the fire pole and pulled off of the oven. Now, to me, when you see these photos close up of the stove, it's really curious to me because no one knows how this fire was started. They're alleging that it was with this lighter that's never been found, but that Emily said she saw, and then her mother said she saw it after all the crime scene photos have been taken and everything underneath the kitchen table. So if there's no lighter, then there's been suggestion that he used the stove to ignite himself. And I've had those questions. Okay, well, were there the burn marks on him? Like, how did he just put his arm on here? But when you look at this, you see like there was no fire started on the burners here with all that oil. Like it didn't get hot enough and then be like, oh, we've got some oil. Let's start a fire over here. Even with the oven mitt like sitting there on top of it, it was still just smoldering. So it's just hard for me to figure out how a flame ignited with just the oil and then the burning element, because that's really the narrative that's pushed, since the lighter, they can't explain what happened with the lighter. Here in the hallway, you can see this is what some of the reports are showing after the scene was cleared. You can see that David was walking throughout, so you've got a really clear indication of where he was, which is important when it comes to the window that I was talking about earlier, because you can see him just walking around the apartment. I just can't even imagine what was going on in his head. It breaks my heart looking at this. So here you can see a clear footprint of his. And in some of the other ones, you can see some shoe prints, and I believe that's from the maintenance manager. It also could have been from first responders walking through after the fact and then taking the photos, but I think even some of them are from the maintenance as well. Because here you can see this one with his footprint, and there's so many different impressions on there. I guess it would have been really interesting to hear or know if they photographed Emily's shoes to see if she was like going about for quite a while. She said that she had time to grab her sweater, a shirt, her phone, her keys, her dog, and put her shoes on before before being pushed out of the apartment. So I'm curious as to what those shoes were and if they match any of these footprints and see like how much movement was going on. Now here is the infamous knife. The knife that we're all just supposed to forget about. And I feel like if anything is going to be answered, that is top 2. Who put the knife there? It wasn't David. Who was it and why? Especially since in another report they admit, there's no fingerprints, there's no nothing, there's no soot, there's no this. So we're just supposed to forget it. And they say, we don't believe that it had anything to do with this. This photo is really hard for me to look at. This is a clear indication that David was sitting, waiting on his couch. There's oil all over the couch. And then here, this is the living room area where the investigators had shot it open to try to get the smoke out. Here is a photo of the kitchen. So this is the kitchen area that her mother is saying the lighter was found, and then when she found it, she just put it on the counter in the apartment and left, and then it's never been seen again. I've tried my hardest to get a really clear look. From what I can see, I can't see a lighter, but again, we also can see that the full view is obstructed. You can't see everything. In my opinion, I don't think there was a lighter still in the house. I think the lighter left the house if there was a lighter, which there would have had to have been a lighter to start this flame, because it's still not making sense with the burner to me. This is just what I think. These are my opinions. But I just think if I had found the piece to show what caused all of this, I wouldn't just pick it up and be like, oh yeah, I saw it and I just left it there. No, you call the investigators immediately and you say, I found it. It wasn't a secret they were looking for this and trying to figure out how it started. And then they just started piecing out their own information to save everybody's butts involved, in my opinion. This is just another angle from the kitchen. And I've tried to look really close to see the sprayer part of the sink. And from both angles of the kitchen, it looks like it's still in there. It doesn't appear to have any oil. Just from a far view, there's nothing up close of it, unfortunately. And I know that doesn't really mean anything either if she did pull it out, because she says when the fire marshal wanted clear answers, did you pull it out? She says yes. I know that those also can have like that retractable cord, kind of sucks it back in there. So really, we wouldn't know unless we were actually there to pull it out and see like, oh, if you pull it hard enough, does it just like stay out and flop down, or does it go back in? Another question I thought of was that's so much further out than where the stove is. So if you saw the stove was on, why not quickly just go and turn it off? Like when you're leaving, because you couldn't get to the sprayer, you have to turn around and then you still pass the dishwasher and the stove. Turn the stove off first instead of running away, going to rinse yourself off, wash your arms off, come back, grab your phone, grab your keys, grab your dog, grab your shoes, grab your everything and leave. I don't know. I just thought it so odd when I saw it, because you actually had to, are past the stove. So if he's kind of blocking from the sink, that means that you still can turn around and have all of that space to turn the burner off. So here it looks like there's a phone on here. So I'm assuming this is David's phone, if that's what this is. I mean, it looks like one. It's all covered in the extinguisher. This is from the maintenance man extinguishing. But then you'll see in the bedroom, there's another one. Before we get there though, this is the spare bedroom. You can see in the entrance here, the footprints that are here are from first responders. These are boots, not David's footprints. And then you can even see in this next one, when you go even closer to the window, this window's wide open. So I looked on weather history, and the temperature in Plymouth that evening was -2 Fahrenheit, which is -18 Celsius for any Canadians or people who go by Celsius. So that's really cold. There's no reason why you're just gonna have a window open that night. And you can tell here that it wasn't David who opened it. There's no fingerprints, blood, tissue, oil, nothing on the window itself to open it. And then you can even just see on the floor around there, there's not even footprints showing the boots anymore at this point. So it's safe to say that it wasn't David. And if it wasn't the first responders who were the next ones to be in it, then that means that window was open before she left. Why was the window open? Was this kind of, okay, I'm going to try to get out from the window, but then I can't get out because I'm on the 3rd floor and then I got my dog? I don't know. I'm very, very intrigued by this whole window being wide open, not even just a little smidgen. You know, some days I get really warm when it's cold outside and I just want a little bit of, I just want a little fresh air, just a little pinch open. But to open up my window wide like that in -18 or -2, no. And then coincidentally on this specific night, you know, all of these questions that add up. So here you can see in the hallway, the footprints are leading into the bedroom. We do know that he went back on the bed. There is tissue and oil on the bed itself. So I just want you to see like the comparison of how obvious it is to see like which rooms he went in and what areas he went in the house and where he didn't. And that room next with the big, you know, open window, he didn't. Now, when I look at the photos of the bed, I don't know whose side was whose, but to me, it looks like only one person was laying in bed this evening. That side up against the window looks like it's still made. And she did mention that they both had gotten in bed, watched the evening news, and then she decided that she didn't want to watch it anymore. She was going to go to bed, put the blanket over. As far as she knew, he was beside her. Then at one point she looked up and then he was sitting closer to the TV because she said to turn it down because she was trying to sleep. But to me, it looks like he never was in the bed, or she wasn't, depending on whose side of the bed they slept on. On the bed, you can see clear areas of where David sat after the fact. Now, when I look at his nightstand, again, some more questions here. I believe this is his Bible here on top of the Kleenex box. And she said that she saw it on the bed, at the foot of the bed, on his side of the bed. And then here, makes me so sad to see his chewing the nicotine gum because he is a sober house. After he came back, he wasn't allowed to chew. He wasn't allowed to do anything. He had to have this gum. And I just saw it. I was like, oh, there's your gum. But you see his wedding band right there. Again, I don't know what David's thought process would be, but I would assume that if he was thinking about divorce and going to live with his parents the following day, he wouldn't be worried about going down to his truck and getting his wedding band, which is what Emily said he did. She said one of the times that he left the building, it was to go down and get his ring in the truck because he forgot it there. I mean, are we really going to be that concerned about leaving it in the truck when we're getting divorced and then not just putting it on if you were wanting it back? Why would you come and put it on your nightstand? To me, this is telling. This is very, very strongly to see a wedding band on the nightstand. And then there's this, it looks to me like another phone. I don't know if it's, I'm like, do they have iPods that side? Do they make iPods anymore? I don't think they do. So I don't know whose phone this is. And it also looks like there wasn't much of a struggle on the nightstand to get phones because you can see that this charger is laying over it. In one of her statements, she does said that there was this struggle to get these phones off the nightstand and that David had already got it. That was one version. And then she said that she had gone to the bathroom and went to go get her phone and saw that it was already gone. So I don't know whose phone this is, but there was one there. Maybe it was an unusable one. I don't know. Questions that aren't answered. And the door is just devastating. I'm not going to put the photos on here, but if you go to Gavin's site, you can see. To me, it appears that from when he was at the entrance with the door open of him just like hitting it and sliding. And there's blood that's hitting the door. And then this is when they told him that he had to crawl to his left and come out. It's so hard. And I realize that, like the investigator said in one of those interviews, you know, sometimes you can't give answers, but not like this. It's not that you can't try to give answers. There has been no attempt to try to explain this laundry list of questions. Saying, oh, we just don't know what happened, it's just not good enough. Also keep in mind, I don't think I mentioned it in the first video, David had sent a text to his dad 50 minutes prior to this happening. His dad said, hey, make sure you give me the number to the doctor that you're seeing. This was the therapist that he was assigned to and the one he was writing the notes to, getting stuff out there that she was reading that we now know. But he was in full cooperation of his father being involved as well. And he said, oh yeah, I have to find it. I'll give it to you tomorrow. And he said, okay, sure thing, son, like good night, have a good night. And then all of a sudden, you know, less than an hour later, this happens. You probably noticed there aren't any pictures of the bathroom, and that really bothers me, especially since she admitted to being in there and washing off. You feel like you would probably want to have photos of all the rooms. See, you know, like, okay, did she try to go in there and rinse off? What does that pattern look like? Do you see shoe prints? You know, I'm just very curious as to why there wasn't any, or if there are, why they weren't released. We don't know. To me, looking at all of this, you can't help but feel that the Elmquist family has been completely dismissed. Like I said, I realize that not every single question can be answered, like what exactly happened? How did this happen? What caused this? But the ones that they're asking, they're valid. Those are questions you should be able to answer. Like, who put the knife there? Who put the knife there? How about that one? And why did Emily never tell the police, only the fire marshal, when she was pressed about it, about David and her discussing that he was going to be going to his parents' house? You'll remember in the police report that we just talked about, he said, oh, I did ask about it, but Emily said that conversation never happened. Well, now we know that it did because she told the fire marshal that they talked about it. So now that is a reason to have another conversation and ask these questions. Why didn't you tell me that? When I asked you, why did you lie? Everything she said was believed. And you can tell all everybody has been doing and hoping is that the Elmquist family will just let it go and that their negligence will just get swept under the rug, and any evidence tampering or planting that may have been done, which I don't want to be accusatory. I'm just looking at the photos and going by the statements. It's like, it's clear they even say themselves this had no part in it and we don't know who put it there. Well, we need to know who put it there, because if it wasn't you, then it was Emily, and why are you asking her about it? And then the marks on the wrists. What about the abrasions to his head? Like, come on. It's just so much. And to put yourself in this family's shoes, it's kind of scaring and really disheartening that something like this probably could happen. Well, it could, not probably. It's happening right now to an everyday family. And it's so sad that it's their responsibility to be raising all of this money to fight just for justice. It bothers me that one of the officers said, well, part of her story has changed, but for the most part, it's been really consistent. And, you know, people can rehearse a story. Someone in the comments of the last video actually brought up a really great point about rehearsed stories, or stories that seem very believable. And it could have been the day before. That all of that turn of events could have happened the day before, minus the whole oil pouring, with having this really ordinary day. And then you're just kind of meshing things in to make it more cohesive to stick to, because then you're able to kind of remember events that actually happen instead of just making them up. But what's frustrating is, of course, her story can stay consistent because all she does is talk. She talks and talks and talks and controls the interview. Not once did anybody say, oh, okay, so you washed your oils. How did you wash it off? What soap did you use? That's really interesting, because it takes you can't just use like an everyday hand soap to just like instantly wash this oil off of you. There was never a point in any of the interviews that anything she said was not questioned. And questioning doesn't even need to be accusatory. It just needs to be clear. The only interview that I heard where that was done was the one done with the fire marshal, and that's the interview where more stuff comes out, because it's like you need to give the facts, and all of a sudden you don't have time to think about a new story. You need to make everything fit. So that's when you start sprinkling the truth, because you have no options but doing that, because you're on the spot. Something I do want to point out too in terms of the autopsy report that David's sister pointed out to me was, at one point she says David ate, then she said he didn't eat, then she said she had to force him to eat, and then he was eating and chewing so loud she had to leave the room. According to the autopsy report, though, there was no sign of food or medication or pills in his stomach. This is another reminder that the Elmquists are doing this on their own. No investigator caught that. The coroner, from hearing her version of events, didn't catch it. It's all too much. You don't even know where you want to start for an answer. Is it the wrists? Is it the knife? Is it this? Is it the divorce talk that you never brought up? On top of all of this that the family is dealing with, they also recently had to deal with Emily serving a restraining order against David's father, Scott. The judge said that there was no evidence whatsoever. He's never threatened her, stalked her. In fact, he had gone through great lengths to keep her identity from the public, referring to her as Mrs. X, and just wanting answers. There were multiple attempts to do this in a private manner for years. Keep in mind, this happened in 2018 and we're in 2022 now. It's gotten to the point where they can't be alone anymore. They're so alone and so unsupported, and thank goodness for all of you. They feel your love so strongly and your support, and it means so much to them. It means so much to me. I just thought, in terms of the restraining order, I mean, even if it was dropped and it was baseless, like, why are they having to deal with this? They're trying to get answers and justice for their son. These are questions you would think you'd have as a wife. She has been remarried now, so I'm sure there's that piece of her just wanting to move on. But if you really cared for this man, these questions you should want answered as well. Who put the knife there? What's with the marks on him? Unless you're wanting to just wash your hands of the whole situation because you don't want more questions coming towards you. A lot of you have brought up their wedding registry that you can still see online, David and Emily's, and I don't know how the knot works. I never used it before, but their wedding registry is also tied to her new wedding registry. So if you click the Target link on it, it'll bring you to the new registry with her new husband's name on it. The whole thing's bizarre. They use the same photographer. It just makes the hair on my arms stand up. It's neither here nor there. It doesn't prove guilt or anything. It's just icky. At the end of the day, though, all the Elmquist family needs is our support. The latest on having things reinvestigated is another hurdle. The Attorney General got back to Scott and said that he can't reinvestigate anything and that they have to go to Mike Freeman, he's the attorney and politician that's serving Hennepin County. So that is not independent. What the Elmquists want is for Governor Walz and Attorney General Keith Ellison to do what they did on George Floyd case. By the way, this is the same jurisdiction as all of that. They want to be granted an outside prosecutor to look into this. Like I said earlier, Amy has set up a GoFundMe for the family. This is a huge financial strain on them. I'm going to be donating my AdSense to the family for their fight. And I thought I was trying to think, okay, I don't want anybody to feel a lot of pressure to donate, but I do know that we just have such a powerful community here. And I thought, even $1, I know a lot of people say that, but what if we did like hashtag $1 for David? We have just about 170,000 subscribers. We only need like 10,000 of you to donate $1 to help the family. And that is so cool. To me, that seems so attainable. So what I would love, it makes me emotional just thinking about it. It would make my heart burst is if you guys could go to the GoFundMe, donate $1, and then in your comment, if you want to leave a nice inspiring message for the family, please do so. And then just hashtag $1 for David. I want to see how much we can make this spread. They really need our help here, you guys, and they are just such a wonderful family. I mean, I want you all to remember they still feel the same way as they always have. They're not trying to accuse somebody outright. They just want answers. And I mean, is that really hard to ask? They just want a fair shot at everything being explained. And if it comes out that there was no police misconduct, no sinister activity that happened behind those doors that night, then that's the next process of them moving forward. Then they can move forward. But at this point right now, that they haven't been given that opportunity and they need it. At the end of the day, when we all move on to the next video, the next family story, the families we talk about, they're still living in and that being their everyday life. And I just appreciate and I love you all so much for having so much empathy and compassion and love. I know you always say that you appreciate the voice I try to give for victims and their family, but really, I wouldn't be able to do that if you didn't support me in doing that. If that wasn't content that you wanted to hear, if your hearts weren't that big that you wanted to be a part of something and listen to someone's story and really digest it and send love to the family and raise awareness for the victims, I wouldn't be able to do what I'm doing. So you all mean so much, and I don't think that you give yourselves enough credit for everything you do by just watching and supporting. So I want to see how powerful we can be on that GoFundMe, you guys. We've got this. Thank you all so much for everything you have done, everything you continue to do. You all mean so much to me, and the Elmquist family means so much to me. So to see you supporting them, it's the greatest feeling ever. I'm so proud of you. I'm so proud of this channel, and I'm so proud of everything we created together. Thank you for supporting me and allowing me to do this. I will make sure to keep you updated as things unfold. Please continue to share the story. Tag 2020, tag Dateline, tag all your favorite anchors, tag 48 Hours, tag them all. All right, that's it for me today. If you haven't already, please don't forget to like and subscribe. You mean the world to me. I love and I appreciate you so much. I will see you in the next video. I will miss you terribly until then. Make sure to love each other, love yourself, and I will see you soon. Bye.